Hello again and welcome to another Warhammer 40k Mordy and Glory video. Today guys, we are going to be doing a unit review of the Imperial Guard Valkyrie. Now the Valkyrie comes under the battlefield role of flyer. Now the Valkyrie is actually the main flyer for the guard on the tabletop. Now I know there will be some longbeards watching this video grumbling to themselves, chuntering about something called a vendetta and other flyers that you used to be able to take in your guard armies, but right now I consider the Valkyrie to be the main flyer of the guard simply because it is the only one that you can get in your codex. However, if you are a flyer enthusiast and you want to take a look at some other options for the guard, I highly recommend checking out Forge World. The guard has a huge amount of flyers that you can get from Forge World, and many of them are actually pretty good on the tabletop as well, including the Marauder Destroyer. So be sure to check that out if you are a bit of a flyboy. But for now, let's get back to the Valkyrie and the main focus of this video. Now, the Valkyrie can actually be taken in squadrons of 1 to 3. This is kind of curious because as per the balanced data slate and the FAQs for Warhammer 40k 9th edition, no army can actually take more than 2 flyers at any time. Now, in case you're wondering why this is the case, essentially at the beginning of 9th edition, there was a real problem with flyer spam, and so Games Workshop just did a blanket nerf to all flyers. And unfortunately, some factions, like the Guard, kind of got caught in the crossfire for the shenanigans of the Eldar and the Adeptus Mechanicus. Now, the reason I mention this is you won't find this restriction in your codex. You will look at your codex and go, hey, look, I can take 1 to 3 flyers. That's pretty good. Hey, that means I can take 6 in my army. Sadly, as we're recording this video right now, you can't do that. However, that could easily change. But now that we've talked in broad strokes about what the Valkyrie is and how many you can take in your army, let's do a little bit more of a deeper dive on the specifics of this vehicle. So the Valkyrie actually boasts a pretty impressive stat line for a flyer at its price point. It comes with movement 20 to 40 inches. It's got a weapon skill of 6+, but realistically you're not going to be using this thing in combat at any time. It has a ballistic skill of 3+. Now that's really important to note because back in the old codex it had a ballistic skill of 4+. So it's gone up a ballistic skill, which is great. It's got a strength of 7. It's got a toughness of 7. It's got 14 wounds, 3 attacks, but again, you don't worry about those because they're for combat, leadership 7, and a 3+ save. Now, with that stat line, the Valkyrie is actually a surprisingly tough flyer on the tabletop for Warhammer 40k. When you take a look at other flyers, they typically have got 10 wounds and maybe a 4+ save, and most of them rely upon that inbuilt -1 for supersonic for flying around to keep them safe. But the Valkyrie has that inbuilt -1 just like every other flyer does, and then it has 4 more wounds than most other flyers and an extra save. So overall, it is a real chunky boy and it is a proper flying brick. Now, principally, this unit is meant to be a transport. It can carry up to 12 models, which means it can carry a full squad and an attendant officer and maybe another advisor as well. The unit also boasts some pretty good abilities to help support its role as a flyer. For example, it comes with grab shoot insertion, which allows you to disembark from the transport after it has moved. So you can get the benefits of being like mechanized infantry without actually having to take the mechanized infantry regimental doctrine if you take flyers and Valkyries as your transports rather than taking things like chimeras and tauroxes. Now there are a couple of extra little bits that you're going to need to be aware of when it comes to grab shoot insertion. The first one being is that when you disembark after the Valkyrie has moved, you need to stay 9 inches away from any enemy models. It's kind of like your units get to deep strike from the back of the Valkyrie. Now, this is very helpful for units that don't natively have a deep strike ability, such as Cadian Shock Troops or Death Corps of Kree, or things like Command Squads. Now, what's really interesting is Scions actually get an extra little buff from using a Valkyrie. You see, normally Scions can deep strike in from reserve like many other units such as Terminators, and they have to stay 9 inches away from the enemy. However, if Scions disembark from the Valkyrie using the grab shoot insertion ability, they can actually get out 6 inches away from their enemies. Now, what's great about this is that it allows you to insert your Scion squads into much smaller gaps. Now, from a tactical point of view, this is pretty big because it opens up multiple other secondaries for you to be able to take advantage of. One of those being, for example, retrieve Nachman data. Normally, it can be very difficult for you to get that last Nachman point in your enemy's sort of deployment zone / table quarter, and your opponent could try and screen you out. But with a Valkyrie, with grab, shoot, insertion with a couple of scions inside it, that becomes much easier. You can slot into a little 6-inch gap, drop down, do retrieve Nachman data, and have a great time. You can also take advantage of things like line breaker as well. So scions plus a Valkyrie really opens up quite a few secondary objectives for you as a guard player. The other great thing about the grab, shoot, insertion ability is it really gives you that good ambush potential. Now, some people see that ability and they go, right, I'm going to load up a couple of scions, turn one, blast them out into the enemy's deployment zone, drop down and start smashing everything. That can be quite good, and if you can pull off a good alpha strike, I'd highly recommend it, although it can be a little bit pricey if you go for that. Sometimes putting 500 points into a Valkyrie alpha strike doesn't always pay off. Instead, what I like to do is kind of be more of a patient hunter with my Valkyries. Have a couple of squads up in there and the Valkyries flying around, providing some decent fire support with that ballistic skill 3+ now. And when the opportunity presents itself to jump on an enemy backfield unit, maybe they've just got 5 intercessors holding their home objective and they've committed most of their army to the midfield. That'll probably present itself about turn 3. When that happens, you can just dive in, drop your units out, take the enemy's backfield objective off them, and it's going to be very difficult for your opponent to turn around and start redirecting his army. That is the ambush potential that I really like from the Valkyrie and the grab, shoot, insertion ability. Now, despite the fact that the Valkyrie is primarily a transport, it can actually also function as a pretty decent gunship and fire support unit as well. My favorite Valkyrie loadout is one with a multi-laser and 2 heavy bolter door gunners and the multiple rocket pods. That loadout allows you to put out a serious amount of firepower, and thanks to the fact that the multiple rocket pods have now had a buff and they've got an additional strength and AP, it means that it'll take a decent chunk out of anything. When you combine that all together, you're going to get 4 shots from the multi-laser. They've been buffed up as well. 4 shots from the multi-laser plus 6 shots from the 2 heavy bolters plus an average of 7 shots from the multiple rocket pods. You are looking at a unit that can put out 17 decent anti-infantry shots, all of them with at least an AP value of 1. Now, I know some people will say, Morning Glory, what about that las cannon? The las cannon is pretty good, don't get me wrong, it is only a 5-point upgrade now, so certainly is very tempting. What I would say is if you are getting a Valkyrie, point it up with the multi-laser. That comes in at about 150 points. And then if you've got 5 points left over at the end of your list, then upgrade the multi-laser to a lance cannon. The Valkyrie doesn't need the lance cannon. It can really do quite well with that anti-infantry shredder loadout. But also, having a ballistic skill 3+ lance cannon flying around the battlefield is nothing to be sniffed at. So that would be my recommendation when it comes to equipping the Valkyrie. See if you've got the points left over, and if you do, splurge for that lance cannon. However, one weapon that I cannot recommend you take on your Valkyries is the Hellstrike missiles. They're just not very good. They're a single strength 8, AP -3, flat damage 3 weapon. Now, if this thing had 2 shots every single turn, that would be worth it. But the fact that it's only a single shot really just makes it not worth it at all. You have Lehman Russes in your army now, which have got loads and loads of flat damage 3. You don't need it coming from your Valkyrie. The main purpose of the Hellstrike missile is meant to be against flyers. In fact, if you shoot a Hellstrike missile against a flyer and manage to successfully get through the arm and everything, the damage actually goes up to D3+3, but still, it's just not worth it. It's a one-shot weapon, and you have no way of putting any rerolls in it. It's just, trust me, it's not worth it. Go for those multiple rocket pods. You will not be disappointed. Couple of other things to mention about the Valkyrie. It does have a hover mode, which means that if you're struggling to maneuver your Valkyrie, maybe you're worried about having to fly off the board or something like that, don't worry, you can just pop it into hover mode and it will have a great time. One thing to mention is the hover mode isn't as useful as it once was. In the last codex, if you went to hover mode, the Valkyrie got +1 to hit, and that's where you got that ballistic skill 3+ from. But they've done away with that in the new book. So if you go into hover mode with the Valkyrie, it's ballistic skill 3+. If you're flying with the Valkyrie, it's ballistic skill 3+. The main reason for the hover mode is so that you don't have to go the 20-inch move if you don't want to. Now, another really cool thing about the Valkyrie, which it's not had before, is it can now deep strike, which is actually really, really useful. If you don't intend to use your Valkyrie as an alpha strike platform, there really isn't much reason to start it on the board. I mean, the problem with flyers is that they can be seen from turn 1. Doesn't matter really where they are. They're up in the sky. They can be seen, all right? They don't benefit from dens. They don't benefit from obscuring terrain. So really, if you start them on the board turn 1, the enemy can just see them and just shoot them. So the good thing about being able to put it in deep strike is you avoid that problem now. You can just come in from deep strike, turn 2, and avoid that potential of being picked out of the sky turn 1 before we even get a chance to move. So the Valkyrie does sound like a pretty good unit, but it does have a couple of drawbacks. The first one being, for a transport, it is actually surprisingly expensive. It's going to set you back 150 points, maybe 155 if you sprung for that las cannon. Now, the Guard has access to much cheaper transports than that. You could take almost 2 Chimeras for the same price as a Valkyrie. And those things are just as durable because they can hide out of line of sight. If you like Tauruxes, you can actually get 2 Tauruxes and change in comparison to taking a Valkyrie. And if you're taking it as a gunship as its primary role, well, the Guard actually has other units that can do just as much firepower as a Valkyrie for significantly cheaper. I mean, just look at the Leman Russ. That thing is basically the same cost as a Valkyrie, but it's going to do more damage every day of the week. And so because of this, I've only scored it 7 out of 10. It would be a fantastic unit, but at the end of the day, there are things that can transport cheaper than it, and there are things that can do more damage than it for the same price point. However, it is actually a pretty good unit. Like I said, its main role should be trying to grab you some extra secondaries. It can do a little bit of firepower. It can do a little bit of ambushing. It is still a very good unit, but you kind of have to have a game plan around it. You can't just slap one in your list and have a good time, unlike, the Leman Russ, for example. So I would describe the Valkyrie as a decent unit, but in no way a mandatory unit. Some armies will include 1. Maybe if you're going science, you're likely to include 2, but you're not going to really find them in every single Imperial Guard army that you come across. However, if you are a fan of the Valkyrie, don't be disheartened because, like I said, they are actually a really decent unit, and you won't be tying one hand behind your back or penalizing yourself if you decide to bring one. You'll just have to make sure that you have a role for it and you have a plan for it in your game plan. But those are just my thoughts on the Valkyrie. Let me know what you think down in the comment section below. Do you like the Valkyrie or not? And if you do like it, what is your game plan for when you're running this thing? Are you a Scions player? Do you ever take Valkyries or do you stick to Taurus Primes? Put all that down in the comment section below. If you've enjoyed today's video, make sure you smash that like button and make sure you're also subscribed to never miss an episode. If you've really enjoyed today's video or you have found it particularly helpful, then please consider becoming a channel member or Patreon supporter. It is thanks to the channel members and the patrons that I'm able to do Mordian Glory full time. I'm able to put extra effort into every single one of my videos, do more research, and also produce more content. One of the big perks for being a channel member or Patreon supporter is you gain access to the Mordian Glory Discord server, which is a community with over 600 active members. In there, you'll find everything from Imperial Guard memes to tactics to hobbying to painting, loads of just great people and experienced players for you to be able to learn from and chat with. So that sounds like a whole lot of fun. Then please consider becoming a channel member and Patreon supporter and getting yourself in that Discord. And I'd just like to take a moment to say a big thank you to my latest channel members. So thank you to G Den Knight, Ralph Risk, Josh Greenfield, Jeffrey, Ozzy Mandacles, Electro Halo 8, Max Dealey, The Wizard MF, Stillhammer Jake, Tim, Trays in the Infinite, Roger, Desperate Measures, Larry, Exodus, Rowan, Eamon, Reg, Joseph, Felix, and 15 glorious minutes. Thank you guys for doing your part. Thank you being channel members. I'd also like to take a moment to do a shout out for the latest Patreon supporters as well. So a big thank you to Simon Olsen, Max, Dart, Sean Koch, Mark Lee Sim, Knack, Riley, Alex Wilson, Josh, James, Jesse, Noah, Tristan, and 32mm Matt. Thank you guys for your ongoing Patreon support. And last but certainly not least, I'd like to say a personal, heartfelt thank you to all of my top tier Patreon supporters. These are the War Masters, the people that have truly gone above and beyond the call of duty when it comes to supporting the channel. So a massive thank you and an 07 down in the comment section for Bonbon Vert, Navy Veteran, Phil French, Ross Miller, Tekwal, Alex Dengal, John Stubbs, Nick Walsh, Swordfish Trombone, Diesel Fox, Tom Sutton, and of course, Sly Varney, the one-man super chatting army. Thank you guys for your very generous support. It is a big reason of why I'm able to do this gig full time now, so thank you. Hope you all enjoyed today's video. Thank you for watching, and of course, as always, I'll see you guys next time.